Welcome all, welcome all. We once again are tackling another colorful and very inspirational, very inspiring filmmaker. Has covered 11 movies, multiple TV commercials, formed his own production studio, Propaganda Films, which repped many high-profile filmmakers, has been heavily involved with Netflix, including directing episodes of shows that he produces, including House of Cards and Mindhunter. He has done multiple music videos for the likes of Madonna, Paula Abdul, Nine Inch Nails, Aerosmith, Steve Winwood, and more. We are talking David Fincher. So, welcome to the show, Justin.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I just was remembering, is like, yeah, we got to cover him. I had him like on the schedule for like 2025, and you were just like, we were getting back to each other, and it's like, you're just listing a bunch of guys. I'm like, you know what the fuck? Let's already just dive into David. What's keeping us?
Yeah, right. Let's get into it. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad I'm able to talk about someone I've, spent quite a bit of time watching his movies, watching his TV shows, all that sort of stuff. And
he has so many, and unlike other filmmakers where you can often kind of get, the stink eye for, well, what do you mean you haven't seen that by him? He's done so much to where it's like, yeah, it's going to be a while. There's plenty of people who have never seen The Game or will never give Alien Free a chance or didn't know that he used to work at Industrial Light and Magic as like a photographic effects artist, just
totally.
He's done so much, and I figured I'd just kind of get into it. So why do you suppose for a while there he was having to, in recent years, he gets all this acclaim. He's another rarity along with kind of Spielberg and Christopher Nolan of doing all kinds of, different movies and known for his serious yet psychologically gripping style, and yet able to conquer both audiences and critics. Do you think it's just as a music video artist and his actually wanting to think like an audience member where every shot must matter, every purpose must be fulfilled? Do you think he's just, what else is it about him that has connected and resonated, do you think?
He's got a good, I call it like the South Park paradox. And I think David Fincher,
I love this. I can't wait to hear the explanation of this.
A good grab on that, right? So the South Park paradox, and this is it might not seem immediately prescient to what he is, but anyway, I just describe that as like, they'll have like, which one's a good example? So anyway, there's an episode where Kenny is dying or has died, but is like they're about to pull the plug, and it's from what was actually happening in the news back in, I don't know, 18 years ago.
I think I know the episode you're talking about, but I can't for the life of me recall if I've actually seen it.
He's got a PSP, right? Like the PSP is like a big deal right then, and he's playing this game all the time to save. Within the game, you're like saving humanity from all the hell's hordes that are coming in, and all these demons and everything trying to destroy them, whatever. So within the game that they're playing, that's what's happening, and he's just hella good at it. He's not doing anything else, and he ends up like getting run over or something and dying. But then they keep him alive on the operating table. And so all these important things are happening. This is a roundabout story, but I swear it'll get smart. So anyway.
No, it's fine. We're all about metaphors and everything.
So, and this is very typical South Park, and in a way, it's sort of like David Fincher too. So he ends up dying, and we find out that this whole thing was just like a training scenario, so that literal heaven could grab a person from Earth who could actually literally control the forces of good against the forces of evil with this massive PSP controller, basically. And that was like the only way that they could defeat hell. So this is like this huge concept.
So many concepts going in just for one giant joke,
Yeah. and at the same time, so like that's obviously there's no bigger battle to be had, right? And the fact that they would pick Kenny and all this is like so absurd. So there's sort of crazy absurdity also with the most important thing that could happen within this world, and at the same time you got who's standing at the pearly gates? Peter, right? Yeah, whoever it is.
Whoever
anyway,
it is.
Anyway, one of the and I forget if it's even him, but one of the main main angels up in heaven is trying to explain to him what he's doing there, and that is his goal, is to like repel the horse. And so while he's doing this, he's writing everything on a big erasable marker whiteboard, and he starts sniffing the markers and like getting high off the markers while in heaven, and he's like snorting the markers, and then he goes back to writing and explaining that the devil's coming in here, and then he starts snorting the markers again. And it's such like a human, pathetic, like such a cheap joke, but also just such a great joke that like they would be, you know, prone to that sort of shit, even though they're angels. They can't stop sniffing the fucking markers.
Right.
And so it's that sort of paradox. That's what in South Park does it a million times. But it's that thing that I always see of like sort of the thing that just grabs you because it's so easy to like understand, and it's funny, and not that David Fincher's making all that many things that are funny, but you can sort of, yeah, just that moment you're like, the most important battle in the world, also this angel sitting here sniffing markers, and he can't even get through his damn proposal to this kid about how to save the world. And that's sort of
almost
what happens
mirrors what Fincher does. How, I mean, The Ringer indicated you know, in their narrative on him, that basically he knew no matter how an entire film, you know, to quote them, on spools in his brain, actually turning it into reality requires endless amount of compromises, most of which only he would perceive. And that doesn't stop him from finding his way towards his version of a flawless end product. So, I mean, It is interesting how, it's just, you know,
I think his flawless end product includes things that people can love on a very base level. They in Fight Club's a really good example of just seeing the brutality side by side with the discussion of like, we have no great battles to fight. Like, what are we doing here as humans? What the fuck do we care about duvets? Like,
he picks a different style in each film, with really only his similar lighting and gaffing kind of being the only thing that connects any of them, you know?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. But the themes are there, right?
Oh, yeah, the themes are there. Much like Dennis Villeneuve wants to literally hit you over the head with the pain and agony and suffering before you get to the end.
Sure.
And it's still not a happy end. And then, you know, apparently Fincher was friends with, you know, popcorn filmmakers like Dominic Sena, as well as used some of the same cinematographers as Joel Schumacher. And Schumacher kind of adapted a similar kind of style in the 2000s, where he's just very vapid, very blunt energy. And I feel like Fincher, you know, he's kind of a more, if you will, accomplished Brian De Palma of this generation. I feel, although you know, he's going for his own creative suspenseful thrills, because he studied film as far back. You know, many film historians will note, you know, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and other silent film, you know, touches in all of his films. And you know, De Palma was all about, hey, I literally have been watching, you know, Alfred Hitchcock to death, and I'm going to just recreate a lot of his famous sequences, blurring the line between a homage and, you know, stylish filmmaker. So I think Fincher is more of the, you know, I soak up what I want, but I still know what I truly want, and that's all that matters, versus, you know, as opposed to pulling a J.J. Abrams and being like, let's take scenes out of everything and just copy and paste it together, you know?
Yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, I think he actually hides his influences better than just about anyone. I mean, obviously he doesn't make movies like Tarantino where it's so like obvious.
I'm the remixer DJ, and
Yeah.
then adding my 2 cents. And
Totally.
he's not like Christopher Nolan, where, I mean, Nolan has his pros. He also has his flaws. Everyone does. But Nolan is notorious for, I got to do everything. And sometimes I can't fess up that I'm not the best at sound mixing or action scenes. I need to just let the other guys I've hired do their job and make me look good. And Scorsese and Spielberg have all been about keep a positive energy, make sure the actors love what you want, and give them freedom to, do what they want, and let their cinematographers run, rampant, and, just storyboard with the visual effects artists, and boom, you got your movie with some Frank Capra elements and French New Wave and, Kurosawa connections. But yeah, it is like Fincher is having, again, to combat, he and Denis Villeneuve are basically encountering both the audience looking for mindless over the top stuff like Michael Bay, and then having to, have a Christopher Nolan type audience where they want something that will either really rivet them or really piss them off for days because it doesn't make sense the more they think hard about it. So he's having to do, he's never done the same movie again. I can't say he's done similar themes, but I can never say compare The Game to Fight Club or Gone Girl to Seven. Like there's so much different camera angles, themes to latch onto, and I can't ever say that he's done a movie that isn't good in some capacity. Like I don't care for Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, hot take, but just was never into that book or subject material, or it just never grasped my interest. But
Are there scenes you like from it though?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't for the life of me say that there are in any way unacceptable performances or poorly thought out scenes. Like, no, there's plenty of stuff in there. I just never latched onto it. But it's like, it kind of even goes into Zodiac. Some people find that better than Seven. Other people find it good, but more of a slow burn. It's interesting how he basically just wants to. He's like one of the few who I think can make everyone interested in seeing his movies, even though they're not going to ever be happy. They're not going to be even necessarily compelling, but they're going to be very intriguing and suspenseful and just make you talk about him for days. And he's kind of gone in that respect to where it's kind of an unwritten rule, just like when anyone else, his name's announced to a project, instantly what their signature brand is,
Totally.
Scorsese, if his name's announced, there's going to be some unusual, colorful narration and possibly some people getting curb stomped. If Spielberg does a movie, it's going to be probably a brutal war movie or
these
very
days,
upsetting, explosion-filled saga. And then, it's like Nolan, there's going to be a lot of plot twists and Easter eggs. And so with him, you don't really know what to expect. Like all I have to do is basically make sure I don't read a review all the way because it's going to give half the twists away.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he's been able to somehow, he doesn't suffer from the Shyamalan illness.
That's a good contrast because there are so many people who, like you say, is like, what, they were hot for a second and then they kind of blew their load and then they kind of had to rebuild it, Shyamalan was definitely one of those, like, it didn't do him any other favors that he then had to kind of, once everyone was hit and miss on his Twilight Zone-esque kind of nature, then he started doing kind of money films on the side and then being locked out of them, like, The Happening and Last Airbender. And then it's like, then he had to start from scratch and even actually go back to film school. It was just like, fuck, no one wants to do that. How can anyone want to do that? That is not healthy, even when you are looking at the mistakes and what's not working. That's earth-shattering to anyone's, persona. And
Yeah, it would be tough to be him. I mean, and props to that guy for still trying to make stuff for so long. I know that Old, 5.8 on IMDb. Yeah, Old was clearly not a very good movie. According to most people, I didn't see it. But it seemed like he's made the same movie 8 times in a row now, basically.
Yeah.
And I don't think – but the thing is, I think Fincher could have devolved into something like that, because they do have a couple similar first entries in some ways, aside from like Alien 3 maybe, but they're making movies that are dark with a twist.
Well, that's a good segue, because like propaganda films that he launched basically had ushered in and repped so many other current blockbuster filmmakers. Again, Michael Bay, like him, hate him, whatever he is, he's one of those. I don't know what kind of movie to expect other than that it's going to be extremely over the top. Sometimes it's going to be very gritty and serious. Other times it's going to be very campy and junky and kind of a guilty pleasure in some weird essence. It's very weird describing him. And I saw that that company also repped Antoine Fuqua. There's a guy who's kind of made it his bread and butter is have emotional gut punches every movie, to give action for the guys, have drama for the other people who are in the movie, and have A-list actors kicking the shit out of people.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about Michael Bay, them both being from propaganda, and they're the opposite filmmaker. And here's why, because my biggest issue with Michael Bay above all issues is that I think he's the most top 5 at least, maybe the most insulting filmmakers there is.
Yeah.
He thinks his audience is an idiot. He thinks they're just the dumbest people, and then he can get away with anything. He can.
And then he does all these movies that
reuse old scenes, reuse actual old footage from old movies, and we've seen that. We've seen the cut on YouTube of him showing the actual shots from the previous movies and just putting different robots on top of the footage. So, I mean, he's just a cheater. He doesn't give a shit about his audience. He doesn't care if they're smart enough to understand that what he's doing is manipulative and cheap tricks. Whereas
so weird with the
Fincher's the opposite. Fincher's the 100% opposite, because he actually thinks his audience is really smart, and he gives his audience a lot of credit for being able to follow along. And so he gives information really quickly. He lays out complex themes and situations within the movie world in a very quick manner at the beginning of the film, and says, hey, if you're not ready, we're going to leave without you. And so that's the exact opposite of what Michael Bay does. And so
he apparently
quite interesting.
Does that on his sets too, where people have noted from Fincher, they know when he's satisfied, but it's not going to be in the form of a hug necessarily.
Okay.
Like and so I found that interesting, because that basically complements his style. Like, you, the audience, know what you're in for. If you're not paying attention, it's not that it's too clever for its own good or that you haven't been paying attention. It's just you're in the absolute wrong mood to be watching this kind of movie, and you actually could owe it to yourself to rewatch it, as opposed to like a Dogma 95 movie where it's going to be trivial no matter what,
Sure, yeah.
And like you say, Michael Bay, he does dumb toy commercials, and then he does like blockbusters that are easygoing, like 13 Hours or The Rock, and then he does even dumber movies for Bruckheimer. So it's just like he basically he stopped giving a shit, and he just wanted to just have fun with his toys. And it is interesting how not giving a shit can work for certain filmmakers, like, and then there's other ones where it's like, yeah, no, you really do need like 5 more opinions, my dude. And Fincher, I think he just, I loved how in that Rolling Stone article, how he had to squash a more recent article, that he had to just squash the whole, that he's a diva, that he's a control freak. He's like, I might have done 70 takes, but it wasn't all in the same day. Good grief. So I really do feel like that Jake Gyllenhaal argument on the set of Zodiac really did fuck with him for a bit. It didn't kill his progress or anything, but for a moment, it did almost make me put him in the likes of Michael Mann or James Cameron, two people who I admire, but who I feel have fallen from grace quite a while back. But they were notorious for like doing like 50-hour days, just everyone's getting like 3 to 4 hours of sleep and just endless shooting on film reels and doing all, tons of uncredited film rewrites and sneaking into the editing studio and, stuff that you literally cannot do anymore without getting a lawsuit or in trouble with insurance and proper Screen Actors Directors Guild rules. So it's interesting how, he just does like 14 takes of every scene each day, but that somehow that argument, he wasn't, in all fairness, he even backs it up there, is like, you're not doing anything wrong. We're just giving a bit of everything, and everyone seems to think it's like today's TV shows where they literally are doing like 5 takes, multiple angles all at once, and then moving on to the next scene, shooting fast and raw for that docudrama kind of look. And he's kind of more the, hey, you wouldn't have been hired if you weren't good. So don't look for feedback from me. You're awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. Stay in your lane.
It's because actors in general are a very delicate breed, and they want to hear that what they're doing is good, and they want to give feedback, and they want to have confirmation and all those things.
Oh, totally.
I think if you have someone that doesn't really want to play that game unless he absolutely wants to, then there's going to be conflict there.
I would be honored because I don't have to hear any bossy language from you. I get to do what I want,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he was Rosamund Pike was talking about working on Gone Girl and just saying it was one of the best experiences she ever had because he was giving her the time to be able to explore and figure it out and really make it her own in a way that she hadn't had before. So I think it's both sides of the.
You'll find this funny.
Flips of the coin.
Ben Affleck has said that he's basically learned from just about every filmmaker he's worked with, from Gus Van Sant to Kevin Smith to Michael Bay to David Fincher. So it's so funny how those are all 4 totally different filmmakers.
Yeah.
2 of them and definitely in the campy vibe, and Fincher's
diplomatic response from him.
Right. You would think everyone would be picky and just politely say, next question, please. Who am I inspired by? And he basically he took something from each of them and applied it to his own, movies that he's directing now. So it's interesting how, Fincher's had to squish this rumor, and he's had to also just say, I don't know if you've been in film school or anything, but I got so tired of working with so many indie filmmakers who, the actors were speaking their mind, but basically dick slapping the director, big no-no. All you can do is basically, keep your patience, not say anything back, or just silently say, we're going to do something with this footage, but you're not going to be on the set tomorrow morning. But what I was seeing many indie filmmakers doing and acting like, oh, actors are so rude and prima donnas, is like, well, what did you do? Oh, I told them how to act. Oh, well, that's a no-no. You can ask, you make a suggestion. That's just as bad as a manager, being told by the assistant manager how to do their job. Just not cool. Make a suggestion. And don't micromanage. Don't be Hitler.
Well, I think people conflate things that aren't the same thing. And
thank you. Yes. Because
you can't. So it comes.
I think it's black and white when the world is gray.
Sure, that for sure. But it is where the information comes from that is the most important, and I'll explain. So, as a writer, you are not supposed to, as a screenplay writer, you are not supposed to tell the director how to shoot it, right? I mean, you can have little notes here and there. Maybe you get 10 opportunities per screenplay to say, like, and the camera sees blank, or and there is a dolly shot or whatever. But like, beginning screenwriters often litter their works with telling the director how to do things, and you can't do that, right? That's the opposite. That is not your job at all, because that's the director's job.
Bingo.
Okay, so what you have to do is explain your world so sufficiently that the director would know how to do that, the proper director, and would be able to understand, because of your explanation of what the world is, what you would want. All right. And then as you go from the director to the actor, it's the same thing. So the director, through the screenplay and with their own words, is describing the scene so well that the actor knows what their character would be doing in that world. So they don't need to be told what to do. They just need to be elucidated. They just need to understand the world so well.
We'll return after these messages.
Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast brought to you by four aging millennials and our outdated opinions. Join us every Tuesday as we discuss movies, TV, games, and even music, new and old.
Dude, what do you think you're doing?
Are you seriously trying to record a promo without us right now?
Well, yeah?
Dude, you can't just do the promo by yourself. Who's gonna listen to that?
Yeah, and you probably haven't even told them that we're a pop culture podcast where we always agree on everything. For instance, the Sam Raimi trilogy, easily being the best of the Spider-Man movies.
No. But I think we can all agree that Jaws is a classical masterpiece.
Nope, don't like that. But we do all agree that the sequel trilogy of Star Wars is the best in the Skywalker saga, right, guys?
That comment is so ridiculous. I don't even know where to begin.
Anyways, that'll do it from all of us here at Culture Shock. Thanks for listening.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and booty debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
And then that goes to the next round too. So then the actor, then the viewer gets to see. They don't need to be told what to think either. They don't need to be told how to feel. They just need to have the world explained to them so well through the actor, through the character, that they can then make their own opinions. So it goes all the way through every single step of filmmaking. You don't tell someone how to feel. You explain the situation so well that they know exactly how to feel. And
he doesn't talk any smack. He doesn't, it's not like when, George Lucas or Francis Ford Coppola, get in a measuring contest about working with the other. It isn't.
Sure.
one of those where he's like, hey, I did all that. Every interview he says, like, people will ask him, like, what's part of the process? He's like, it's a collaboration. I'm like,
Sure.
that's so he is so much bigger than the very world that he talks about or that he brings to life on screen. He knows, and all these people he's worked with, he's brought them on since the very beginning, whether they're doing the title sequences, visual effects, casting, or just assistant, directing. He has literally been able to convey a sense of their expectations and reality to them. And like you say, he works well with the actors because they understand his tone and mood that he's trying to establish, as opposed to, like you say, take a screenplay that is so not in his zone and then readapt it and then, anger the studio or the screenwriter. Oh, that's not at all what I had, pinned down on paper. Wrong man for the job. He basically, and it's just so rare for someone to, I actually don't mind the uncut version of Alien Free, even though that's basically, this compiled together studio version is like, it was one of those, like, hey, it's imperfect, but it's a watchable creature feature. But it was one of those, is like, at least he got it out the wazoo instantly, and still was doing all the commercials and music videos. And then, everything changed in 95 and he's been able to do, again, fantasy movies, real life documentary, docudramas, historical pieces, and psychological horror films, and other just nail-biting mysteries inspired by real life, ordeals. And I think he's just still one of the many, I would still put him in like the top 20 of current filmmakers in this day that everyone's going to want to see something by him.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he's been more consistent than just about anyone, I would say.
He's careful. It only took getting it out at the rising of his star, and he kept learning every day, how to word stuff differently, how to compromise differently. You see so many others who, some of it is, okay, you've been handed a lot of real bad luck on one giant plate, and then there's others where it's like, I think everyone just doesn't like working with you because you're just a hothead. You're just too opinionated. And I get so tired even now when I see everyone putting a filmmaker on the spot and they're asking them, what do you think of the current indie film, Oscar bait, or superhero deal? It seems like that's coming out like every 3 months. Someone's asked an exclusive Forbes interview, and it's just like, okay, well, this doesn't change anything. We love these filmmakers. I've seen now being asked on the spot, not only Denis Villeneuve, Neil Blomkamp, Jane Campion, even David Cronenberg. It's like, you guys, it can all be enjoyed. You don't have to agree with their point of view. You can just enjoy their work. And it's like, good grief.
Yeah. I think people, we just have never been in a situation where there is so much media out there and so many things being made, but also where things are governed by so few voices, the ones you actually get to see. The idea that you can go to Netflix and then just click a button that says, what's it say? Show me something, or what? I forget. What
yeah.
like that is such a funny idea to me, because I'm like, that's whatever they paid the most money for. That's whatever they want you to see. That's you're just telling them, advertise to me. And the idea that we've sort of come,
some people like to be guinea pigs or follow their leaders off a cliff. I don't know.
That's quite exactly what that is. That's just such a funny, I would like never click that button, even if I wanted to watch the thing that they had.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It would probably be, I don't care how much you spend on it, it's the quality there, and so many people, it's very rare to find someone who is both a businessman and an entertainer. It's like,
sure.
You've seen Robert Towne has been noted as being a great rewriter, script doctor on so many movies of different qualities, and being able to share the credit with all of them. Joel Silver was known as being very passionate while very angry as a producer. And then you just got all these other guys who, again, like you say, they just seem to vary by movie or take a while to find their groove, or just, if you're not doing award-winning movies, then yeah, you're either being the gritty 80s inspired filmmaker, the WTF-ish horror guy, or the pot smoking, cult comedy guy. So it's just like that. There's so many different ways to be a crowd pleaser, or make top 10 movies of the year list, and it just seems like the tastes are changing so very much that with how toxic the internet's become, everyone's kind of forgetting how to be constructive after a while. And I think this guy is going to brings out the best in any kind of audience, any kind of filmmaker who even studies them, because he, like you say, he doesn't try to emulate everything. He just tries to kind of just stick to basics, study, listen, and create,
Yeah. Well, it seems like what drives him, psychologically speaking, from a story perspective, I don't know what's going on inside the dude's head, obviously, but what drives him is that alienation with the world and having to, what would you say, finding situations for it to be difficult for his characters in a unique way over and
make
over
you
and over.
Feel it as
in
opposed to
a lot of times a Kafka-esque way, right? And
Kafka's a good way.
The world falling in on them, and what do they do about it? That's a lot of his stories somehow. And so I think when you can sort of come back to that, that when you're grounded by something fairly specific like that, and you can sort of find his way, whatever the viewer happens to think that their version of that is, I think Fincher has a very specific version in his own world of,
as opposed to being like Ridley Scott, where, oh, you guys are too dumb to get it.
Yeah, maybe. But there's, I tend to think that, like, going back to Shyamalan or whatever, you're like, it seems to me that he just likes movies that flip you on your ass at the end. And it doesn't really matter which.
In many ways, everyone's a plot device in even his best movies. And
exactly.
Christopher Nolan
really matter
has really
where that comes from.
Oh, totally. I mean, that's how I am with Christopher Nolan. He has very creative plot twists. And then there are times where it's like, that undermines everything. Or that was cool and all, but I can't watch this more than twice. I'm just going to find plot holes that.
Well, his things are just such big concepts that it's almost impossible not to invalidate yourself sometime. That's a difficult thing, because he has to create a world that is so supernatural in one way or another that, like, how do you make everything work, and how do you not make it a 9-hour movie with a bunch of explanatory? He already has enough exposition, obviously, but how do you not just like have like a works cited and be like, oh, by the way, this could work because of this reason on the screen as you're watching it.
Totally.
And so he has to cut bait at some time, and it hundreds, if not thousands of times in a screenplay to be like, I know this is sort of crazy, but just go with me on this. And so as long as you go with him on most things, he doesn't like, he doesn't make you suffer for playing by the rules most of the time. And really, that's the only time when I get mad, is when a filmmaker doesn't even play by their own rules. And that's a Michael Bay thing in spades.
Oh, hell, that's a Dogma 95 thing. I see so many of those guys now are using CGI and scripts. I'm like,
oh, sure.
That's not part of the Dogma 95 style, so why even bother doing it?
That's funny. Yeah, it was a limited ethos that could only get you so far. And it was obviously a reaction, and because they came out with the digital cameras that were sort of capable enough to be able to do that and all that.
Bingo, the IMAX cameras and everything. And Fincher has stated, of the people he admires and who, as well as a contrast to the kinds of movies he makes, he noted is like when he sees a Steven Soderbergh film,
Sure.
He wants to see a particular gimmick. When he sees Sam Mendes film, he's looking for how large scale it is made and translates across screen. So it was like, that was an interesting, either in the Decider or Rolling Stone chat, one of the two. It was cool just seeing him sum up, because those are very similar filmmakers in that they have accomplished a lot of different just heavy material to do and come from similar walks of life. And to see this guy again, you know, so many other music video and commercial directors just get a bad rep just because they're not necessarily known for being the most intense storytellers. And Fincher even acknowledges, like, I got you know, you got a claim for like George Michael's Freedom video and the 1990 music video that Michael Jackson did. And when people said, "Oh, I love that Michael Jackson video," he's like, "Yeah, but it was going to be big. It was it's a Michael Jackson, you know." So I thought that was interesting, because it's like most people would have been like, "Yeah, you liked it, didn't you?" Eat it up. It was like, he's not necessarily a circus performer where he wants to see how much cotton candy and wows he can get from the audience, so much as he just wants to see the thing just be conjured up, you know, that he's agreed to make for a giant studio entity. So
yeah, he understands the elements that are appealing to humans on a base level, and he knows how to put those in there to grab
totally,
while having a very vast undercurrent of a very specific take of his idea of human psychology. So those are always happening simultaneously in all of his films, in all of his TV shows,
and all the screenwriters.
Really what makes what he is yeah.
But I mean, even all the screenwriters he's worked with, like, have complimented as like, he understood us. We knew he was the right guy to convey and bring our material to life. Especially in Sorkin for Social Network and the writer of Seven, you know, they were just both noting is like, yeah, it didn't change a single damn thing that we wrote.
Yeah, and it's interesting because those, so many of those projects seem like they're written by the same people, right? Like, I tend to forget that he even has writers sometimes. I know that he does on almost everything, or does on everything, but I tend to forget that they're not his projects, because they do seem much more auteurish than most people who don't write all their stuff. It's interesting. And, you know, part of that is survivorship bias. It's like there's sample bias, whatever you want to say, because he's picking the things that he wants to do, and so they're already within a certain wheelhouse.
He wants to save everyone time and effort before they push a single button, you know?
Yeah, I suppose it's a lot more.
I think the Alien Free was a wake-up. He's like, I hated making this. He didn't even want to participate in the making of documentary, because he's just like, it's just so many unpleasant memories. Why, you know, best of luck. I don't think I have anything constructive to say, so sorry.
Yeah, he said he didn't want to make any other movies either. You know, he said, I'm probably never going to make another movie again.
Yeah. And we knew everyone does that. It's just like, you know, when you're at a bad job and you're just like, I don't want to work ever again. I fucking hate it here, you know, and that's not true. You got to be able to put, you know, food on the table and hone your craft. It's just, and I think he was able to let all that negative energy out, but he channeled all this other material in him that kept him going. And he was never in such dire need of employment. He was always staying busy and trying different things. And, you know, he has eye-catching visuals. And I mean, in that he really does just think out his shots. And like you say, he's been another, again, rare instance of being able to take other people's stories, make them just as much his own as it is theirs, and convey all these other just vibrant amount of energies and themes that most people just cannot do. Usually it's one or the other, where, hey, it's a cool idea, but it doesn't make any sense. But hey, those visuals were cool. You know, any other filmmaker would have done 50-50. They would have, you know, just done one or the other. They can't do both. And he's able to basically do a lot of different things because, like you say, he understands other people. They understand him. they have the unwritten code. They're almost like a giant corporation.
Yeah.
If not a Gestapo, he's literally he's able to be a giant battalion and rally the troops.
Yeah, it's neat. I mean, people believe in him, obviously, and they've probably believed in him since day one just because he has a certain type of personality that helps that.
He's had so many unrecognizable performances by all the actors he's had in his movies, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
that's very true.
There's even plenty of movies I need to give a rewatch, like The Game, and it's been a while since I've seen Fight Club, so I should probably rewatch that one. It's just all of his stuff does merit some discussion, regardless of whether you want to make it in the top 250 or not. You can't deny that there are many of his films that do leave a lasting impression.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what he says. I'm interested in movies that scar. Is one of his quotes. I mean, that's really
scar.
Yeah. He said when I went in, when I saw Jaws, that was the last time I ever went in the ocean. And that's the types of movies I want to make. People feel that way about something. Not that I'm not trying to hurt them on purpose, but I want it to have that sort of emotional effect on them.
That's a great quote. And I do feel like filling just always seems to go out the window. Everyone's just so taken aback by, again, the check, or I get to work with this talent. And almost always it just seems like there's a sloppy third act and they're just like, I can't do anything. I'm like, yes, you can. You can rewrite it. You can, shoot a few different endings. Because, there's plenty of other guys who've done music videos. Again, Antoine Fuqua did music videos, and he's done all these different kinds of dramas and gritty character studies. Tony Scott has kind of been one of those who's just counter to his brother Ridley, who's kind of wants to do giant epics. He was more just like, I'm going to do a violent, character piece, and I'm going to, make all these shots actually matter instead of just be, oh, that's cool, or that's sloppy, but it's it's a Matrix or Born Identity type style. And I don't even know how anyone gets confidence in each other than, again, just a lot of meetings and a lot of just faith in each other, because it just seems like anyone who bursts onto the scene now is like, they get there but they don't want to talk about their experience because it's very messy, or they are very talented, but they're just known for being prickly, which is a shame because, everyone wants to be able to do something good at work as opposed to hate their life for 6 months.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, that's, you've been working your entire career to get the opportunity to do that thing, whatever you're doing at that moment, whatever that project is, whatever that story you're trying to tell, that's what you've been working towards your entire career to do. Because, you're most...
It's almost like the guys who are on the C or D list, is like most of them will fess up, like filmmakers who were hot for a minute and then kind of made for TV, B pictures, kind of just would say, hey, it's meant to be. That's where my audience is now. Whoever wants me to make what I'm contracted to do. And then you see it with some actors where they had a big head and then their last movie flopped and everyone had an excuse to never work with them again. And then they finally, they found faith, or they found that they need to put their ego aside. And there's others who just, sucked it up. They're just like, hey, I'm a C or D lister. That's just where the dominoes fell. Nothing bad about it. I guess I'll be doing something schlocky for Lifetime or Sci-Fi Channel. It's just, it really does depend on the attitude, on the person. And I think he just said, there is no second chance. I got to make every, movie count every time, instead of, get, just find it complex or find it to be a burden. And, because you see so many other people who get fired and people aren't sympathetic for their termination because they're known for yelling at them, or just, taking way too damn long to set up any shots and exhausting their faith in them. So it's interesting with this guy. He's just an absolute rarity.
It seems like it, and that all comes from confidence, I'm sure. And that's sort of what he's talked about. He has to know more about what film he's making than anyone on set. He has to know more about other people's roles. He's talking about
his first movie when he was 27, and here he is. He's almost 60.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Have you seen his latest movie, which was by his late father, about the writer who conjured up the script for Citizen Kane? I have not seen it, but I need to.
Yeah, I watched Mank. Yeah.
How does that contrast with his other films and TV shows?
Visually and storytelling wise, it was similar in a lot of ways. It's very beautiful and striking, and has its own visual language that he employs. I love that. The storyline is somewhat compelling, not entirely. For something, if he has a fault, I would say is, so many of the characters behave in a way in any of his movies. So many of the characters behave in a way that is not very satisfying as a person, right? Just because people are doing shitty things to each other or are put in positions where they just have to struggle for their lives, and they're not, they don't have at the end of the movie some huge, brilliant moment of figuring everything out and saving the puppy and everyone's so happy now, right? He doesn't have any of those moments at the end of any.
That's true. I would never call him someone who's self-indulgent. He just document and then really show. And it seemed like this was, a more personal project than most, because again, he's adapting his old man's, screenplay. And at the same time, I don't think he was going to get any comfortable. He's like, hey, this doesn't mean just throw money at the screen and see what sticks. I still put the same amount of care that you put into anything else. And
oh yeah, no, I don't think it.
I would call him probably a selfless person in some ways, because there's so many other people, when you see their creative, sometimes it's as simple as, don't shoot the messenger, just nod yes to the studio assistant that came by, instead of telling them to go fuck themselves. And then, there's other times where it's like, well, you really were asking for way too much. You didn't need 10 million to shoot this expensive, crane shot or
sure. Yeah.
And he's very selective about the actors, and I can't even think of any of them that really, I'm sure the studio enlists them because, investment, but that's definitely not what I ever see on screen. It's always just like, okay, I'm working with them, and, I'm going to get something out of them that you haven't ever seen before, performance-wise or character-wise.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah. That's part of the brilliant part of it, because the actors are in the world. I don't think he makes vehicles for very many things.
Yeah.
None of his projects really feel like vehicles, whereas going back to Michael Bay or something, like every single project of his is a vehicle. Either it's for robots or it's for a specific
different kind of explosion.
Yeah, that's all it is. And so he's not doing anything like that. His vehicle is like alienation. Like that's essentially every one of his projects is a vehicle for a complex study of psychological alienation. And you're like, well, that's not sellable. You can't get butts and seats for that. And he's like, well, that's what I do, so take it or leave it. And fortunately, he's found enough things to put on top of that are.
He has some hook, like with Seven. You got,
correct,
again, a serial killer going after people for 7 deadly sins.
Sure.
Social Network was going to be a big thing because it was about the creator of Facebook, but then there was another twist. Is like, it doesn't start or end the way you think. And even though it was already outdated by the time it had come out, it was still very relevant in that it's showing the shady nature of Silicon Valley and how, much like Microsoft and Apple, how everyone thinks they're a genius and everyone's appreciated until, everyone walks out of all those angry board meetings. And, Gone Girl is, again, just dealing with people who aren't easy to classify. You know, who's crazier, the husband suspected of murdering his spouse, or is his wife, you know, more batshit crazy than him? You know, it's
Sure.
There's so many degrees of discussion within all these parameters he sets up to where you can hardly say, you know, it's just like, even if you don't want to rewatch any of his movies and you're like, I got it, I'm good, you're still, it's like, oh wow, there's so many other perspectives you can take away with it. And obviously with all the neo-Nazis misunderstanding Fight Club, I mean, that was going to happen. But again, you can't say he intended a movie to be manipulative. I mean, he even came out as criticizing the recent movie, The Joker, just because he was just very unimpressed with movies that try to do too much, or, you know, are only known because they're a sequel or a spin-off or a reimagining of something, when, you know, instead he just comes out in that interview, he's like, so they took Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy and they mashed it together, and it doesn't work because it's trying to say too many things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting seeing him say stuff like that, because there's so many other people who will kind of do a hot take, but then not really back it up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Or it sounds like a diss, which may or may not be what the point of that, you know, intense interview.
Why at this point? Yeah, you already have a career, man. You already have a career 10 other filmmakers would be happy to have a piece of. So why would you want to be dissing people at this point? Who gives a shit?
Yeah, he doesn't come off as bitter. He's like, okay, you asked me, so I'm gonna tell you what I think, but it's never as like, that guy's an idiot, or
No. Why would you? Yeah. I don't think any person at that part in their career, if they're talking shit like that, I mean, come on, get out of here.
I mean, his responses are just so brief compared to other people in an interview who will just let the F-bombs fly and just, you know, be so unloaded. And I think this is it. He knows how to gain people's attention and trust, but then keep them seated.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of any interview where he's going, oh, you know, losing his train of thought.
No.
He's in it to win it.
Yeah, he's a calculated person who understands exactly. I feel like he understands exactly where he comes from, and has for 3 decades or whatever, right?
Yeah, he was born in
where he was inside, and I think that's an interesting thing about an artist, is to find someone who sort of comes out fully formed. Excuse me.
Oh, much like an artwork, he's definitely does impose that kind of look at you in a museum, and he's the most unusual thing that stands out in that museum, and he's very hard to describe upon closer examination. And I think, yes, he definitely, he's earned the title of artist, and he's also, you know, he didn't want to be anything else. He wanted to be one, and he just kept being a trooper. So.
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, 2 of my other favorite filmmakers are the Coen brothers, or one filmmaker, and in a way you can even describe them as. And,
one giant entity.
Yeah, right. And, you know, the thing that is, their feeling of their films is so consistent. We're talking 22 films or something now, and you know, from start to finish, almost the very first film, maybe the second or third, they start to find exactly what they're all about. But throughout every one of them, we know that it's a Coen Brothers movie, and we know that it's pretty fully formed.
Yeah,
they found which part matters to them, and you know, and those are often characterized. One of their quotes is like, we just put our characters in a situation, and we just keep making everything more and more difficult to see to see how they'll respond. And that's the basis of storytelling, the basis of filmmaking in general. But I think they stick to that in a more specific and measured way than most other filmmakers do. Is that they don't. What would you say? They enter absurdity into each one of those each one of those cause and effect scenarios, and then they just keep going. And they are very consistent in that, and I think they came out fully formed, just like Fincher came out fully formed, referring to, say after their second or third thing, consistently throughout the rest of their career. And I think that's what's so satisfying from a from a moviegoer's perspective, from a fan's perspective, is to see something that is a known entity, but then just keeps getting a little bit better. I love that, because I don't want to see a big departure into some other world, because I got a million other options for some other world. If I want a different type of filmmaker, I can go find that. I don't want
or start the movie off so differently just to appease the masses,
Sure, yeah. I don't want them to change with the times. I don't want them to switch up their style just to fit in, right?
Right.
Rapper says.
There's no point.
No. There's a rapper I like named Aesop Rock, and they talk about, he sounds different than every other rapper, I would say, significantly, and started his first EP, sounds different, sounds exactly like the rest of his stuff in a good way, and has been like that forever. And that's going on 30 years, 35 years, whatever it's been, worth of music. And, that's what you get with a Fincher. That's what you get with the Coen brothers. And that's what you get with, say, a P.T. Anderson or a Wes Anderson. And I'm sure there's 10 more, but after that, that list goes down real fast. Then you find all sorts of other things. So it's interesting. I mean, that's what I like about filmmakers or writers or artists or whatever, is I want them to give me, I want their brand, and I want their brand to be sort of meticulously well defined, and then little wrinkle, little nuance, little addition, but I want that brand. And Fincher is one of those, and that's what's so great about him to me.
Stellar. Well, that's a good closing spot. Thank you ever so much for being here on the show.
Certainly. Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.